Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast today. I am really excited as we are kicking off the new year, getting ready to look at our goals and how we want to grow. I am excited to focus on a topic that I haven't really covered much, really at all yet on the podcast in an intentional way, but on marriage. I mean, this is such a huge part of our lives, so many of us, and it is the foundation of our society. And I focus, as you all know, on like working with women and have the course Rewriting Your Story with God that is focused on helping you look at your story. But one of the things I thought about is how we could apply this to marriage, because this is such a huge need. And so I'm excited because today I get to introduce you to a couple that I've known since grad school, a really beautiful couple, Sarah and Patrick, who have created a brand new course called Restored or Restore, sorry, not Restored, Restore, Catholic Marriage Resource. And yeah, it's just a really beautiful resource that I'm excited to share with you guys today. And so I want to introduce you guys here to Sarah and Patrick. Thanks so much for being here. It's so great to see you guys.
Thank you for having us, Karen. We're excited to have this time to talk with you.
It's great to see you again, Karen.
Yeah. I
Thanks for
mean,
having us.
I met Sarah and Patrick and I go way back to grad school. Was that 2005?
2005?
Fall. Sarah and I were in school together.
Yeah.
Patrick actually was in Wyoming with my husband before I knew him. So it's just kind of, we won't get into that too much, but I feel like I had something to do on some level with
You
guys.
did. You did. We always give you credit, Karen.
The matchmaker.
Just the matchmaker, yeah.
We wouldn't have gotten together. We were both, I guess, too shy or not meeting up in the right places at the right times. I don't know, but you did help us get together.
Come on, I don't even remember all the details, but I was like, I feel like I encouraged that. Yeah, it was.
We definitely did.
It's a great match. It's a great match. Good job, God. I'm here to help. No, but so I just think it's kind of funny how it all comes. Here we are talking about marriage. We got married the same year. We both got married in 2008.
That's right.
So anyway, yeah, it's just so great to see you guys. So Sarah, you've got your master's in counseling. Patrick, you're licensed. You guys are in Georgia. Tell me a little bit about, like, I don't know, how you got involved in this niche, I guess, a bit of marriage, and what led you to create this course.
Sure. So yeah, I work for the Archdiocese here in Atlanta as the marriage and family and pastoral care lead for the past 9 years, really. And it's given me a lot of, skills and background and program development. And in the course of my time here, they also gave me the opportunity to go and study at the John Paul II Institute in Valencia, Spain. So I pitched it to my boss at the time and said this would be a great asset to our group here, and the fact that it was in Spanish, and so much of our diocese is in Spanish. So and they were very supportive, and so I got to fulfill one of my dreams, really, to study under John Paul II and all his great work in marriage and family life. And then, coming back, obviously, and spending more time here at the diocese. And a couple of years ago now, I started to think and pray about what God is calling to me to, because I just had this angst in my heart about there was something more, right? Yeah. And it struck me after a retreat, actually. I went on with Father Dave Favanka. He was talking about mission and what's your mission as a father, a husband, and in your family life and in your work. And so working in the diocese, I've encountered many, many couples who have desired counseling or needed counseling, but just have been unable to get it, right? Whether it's the cost, it's the distance to a good Catholic counselor. So I've always been trying to find ways of connecting people to the resources that they need, just a more affordable way.
Yeah.
And that's when I came up with this idea. I had gained some experience in video and, graphic design even. And so I felt like it was kind of a combination of all the skills that God had been really, helping me to grow and improve on. So
I love it. I love that so much, because I mean, really, your your heart for what led you to create this resource is so similar to what I've been doing. The need is so great, and the number, I mean, practically there's just not enough Catholic counselors to go
Mhm.
around. And just to keep things, I don't know, cost effective, because it is like counseling, it's just it's not inexpensive,
Right.
and and to be able, I feel like to be able to meet people at a level, an entry level where they can, like, this course focuses on the skills and that they need, and build from there, where they might need some
Mhm.
individual counseling work, but it isn't like
Mhm.
they have to necessarily start there. I feel like there's so much that people can learn with when they get invested in putting the time in, to learn and to show up every week, which is so much what this is about. I love the simplicity and the depth of it at the same time. But Sarah, I wanted to give you a chance to share a little bit too, because I know you share a little bit in obviously in the intro of this, but not everybody will get to hear that. So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah. So I have not been practicing counseling. I don't have my license because I haven't worked enough hours to do that. Just from, starting a family and taking care of my boys, raising our boys. Um, I have worked a little bit with couples, which I really loved. I loved just getting to be a part of two people coming together with all their woundedness and brokenness, and just making that effort, and making that effort. And I saw in my short time working with couples, like that God just really showed up when
Yeah.
two people were willing to make that commitment. Um, I saw some really beautiful things working with couples, and it was something that was really fulfilling to me. Um, I know just from our experience, like just how difficult marriage can be, um, especially like if you're in my shoes where you're coming from, not growing up like having your parents together, and not growing up really with like an example of a healthy, happy, loving marriage, or even like knowing what it looks like just to see two people trying to work it out. um, I feel like that can be challenging. I always think that I'm just like learning as I go.
Yeah.
um, but I'm willing to, do what I can to support Patrick and help couples out, because I know that it's just a challenging thing
Yeah.
to be married and to succeed in marriage.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, like within these like Christian community, within churches, sometimes um people can be walking, having a maybe sometimes a facade of having everything figured out, or this perfect marriage, and people can feel alone or isolated
Yeah.
in a struggle. Or people might look at you and Patrick and feel like, if you guys hadn't been so beautifully vulnerable here, be like, well, they've got it all figured out, like they must have the
Hmm.
perfect marriage, you've never had any problems, they share the faith. So because that's another issue sometimes in marriage, where
Yeah, for
the faith
sure.
isn't
It's a big
shared, and that's
challenge.
a different challenge too. But we all, I mean, marriage, it's a challenge. It can be a struggle, but
Hmm.
it's worth it. It can also be really beautiful. And when you have the right skills, and knowledge, and again, I'm going to use this word all the time because I just love it, but being intentional about things, getting off of the default mode of life, which is usually pre-programmed by our family of origin, in our default mode. We've got to put that time in and learn, and so and we learn through experience. I mean, you have your license because you haven't done thousands and thousands of hours, because that's how many hours you need to get a license.
Hmm.
Sarah's been working people with lots of people. It's just not thousands of hours. So she
And
has,
Sarah's credit, she brings so much to the program. I mean, I couldn't have done it without her, and she just has such an intuitive nature about her, and
yes.
can cut right to the heart of things in such a beautiful way. We often joke that I'm kind of up in the clouds with the idealist, and Sarah like always pulls me back down to like what's
Yeah.
real and
Yeah.
what we experience. And so I think
Yeah.
we
Perfect.
complement each other in that
Complimentary.
way. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, it doesn't take long of being married where it's like the illusion is gone, right? So I feel like when talking about marriage, it's really helpful just to be very practical,
Yeah.
because there are so many challenges, and really in a lot of ways, I feel like marriage kind of opens you up to. I kind of have to recognize and deal with like a lot of woundedness from your past, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of the things that maybe you didn't get to learn, you didn't see growing
Yeah.
up. And so like we're just really in need of God's grace and God's mercy.
Yeah. And I love how this really brings together all the different, so it's a spiritual focus. You've got the sound psychology and research from, like John Gottman, for example, right? That's who anyway,
Hmm.
there's lots of different people you pulled from, obviously John Paul too. So you've got
Mhm.
the best of psychology and what's in like marriage counseling world with the foundations of our faith. And
Hmm.
recognizing how, I mean, really without God, marriage it just doesn't work very well. I mean,
Absolutely.
it was his idea, right? So
Right.
clearly, the more we plug into him and his grace, and obviously the truths that we've uncovered through research, it's a perfect recipe. And so I see this, and this is part one of what will be a two-part experience. But part one, and I've begun this with my husband, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about that as we move forward. But it really lays a foundation. And I think as I was talking to them before we started recording, I see this in my groups, like we have to feel safe in order to heal and to have like deep growth. But if we're in a defensive mode all the time, if we're feeling unsafe or like we're walking on eggshells or unseen, unheard, and not managing that well, you really can't move forward. You're kind of in this, I mean, survival mode, or even just stagnant, like we're not growing, we're not
Mhm.
connecting. And especially most of the time, I mean, we haven't seen, most of us didn't have parents like Saint Therese, like we
Yeah.
didn't have
Yeah.
parents who were saints. So I always joke about how, she's one of the few that she became a saint really
Yeah,
young. She had
definitely.
parents who were saints, but most of us
Right.
didn't do that, didn't have that, and so we don't know what we don't know. And we're living, like I said earlier, in this default mode that's rooted in what we've seen, where like these automatic responses and how we have learned to manage conflict. And we do the thing we know probably we're not supposed to do, but it's just so
Mhm.
automatic that if we're not really intentional about changing those patterns, it's really hard to move forward. So this really lays a foundation for what basic tools you need
Mhm.
to have healthy communication, to avoid just different pitfalls, or just become aware of the obstacles that are not serving your marriage, that you could just remove. Maybe, I mean, it doesn't mean it's easy to remove, but once we realize they're there, it's that's the first step. So a
Yeah.
lot of this is helping people growing in awareness of what the obstacles are and where they can grow and practice things like better communication, and so basically like the tools. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit and talk about some of
Hmm.
the practical things you guys cover in the course. I know that one other piece of it I want to give you guys a chance to share is prayer is also a part of this course. It's not all just the do this, don't do that. Like, can you share a little bit about how you've integrated prayer into the course too?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I put a lot of thought into is how to start and where to start, and where couples would be coming from. Um, but like you said, I said, let's just start at the beginning with the foundation. I think we as Catholics, or Christians who have a strong faith and desire to be plugged into our faith, we might know a lot of the theology and really love what John Paul II talks about, but the skills are hard, and the
Yeah.
skills are things like you said we have to be very intentional about, because we can get stuck in bad habits. So
Yeah.
even if things seem simple and maybe we've heard about it before, really implementing them and practicing them and letting them become a part of our relationship, that's
Yeah.
the challenge. That's the struggle,
Yeah.
building them into habit. And so really getting focused on those, even coming back to those if we thought about them before, heard about them before, and really making it intentional and practicing them, is important. So um, that's where we kind of start off, is getting an understanding of, um, number one, our mental disposition, where we're at mentally with this whole process, like preparing ourselves, being open and ready for change. But also, like you said, our emotional disposition, like that safety within the relationship is important. We have to begin to rebuild trust when trust has been broken or hurt.
Yeah.
And so what are those steps that we can take to begin to rebuild that trust, to get on the same page, know that we, are working towards a common goal together, that it's not one versus the other, or so often we
Yeah.
can get pulled into that. Um, but really establishing that mental disposition and emotional disposition first.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the prayer part is big, because we have to come before God and we have to be open to his promptings in our hearts, because so often we're blind to our own woundedness and brokenness. We often point the finger in marriage, right? It's so easy to do that. It's not my issue, it's their issue, right? Or it's not my problem, it's their problem. So really being open to God's promptings in our hearts and our minds, for him to show us those areas of hurt and woundedness and brokenness that we can grow and heal and change. So a simple way of doing that we found in our own marriage is, and Sarah's been really good and brought this into our marriage, was the daily examine. And so doing that each night. And so that's part of the process, is getting couples used to doing that daily examine, just to be mindful of, where did I fall short, during this day? Where did I fail in charity or different areas in my life? So we can just be more tuned in, and then ready to respond in a good way, in a positive way, the next day. So
I love that. Sarah, were you gonna say something? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think he brings in the examine pretty early on in the program.
Yeah.
But I think on a personal level, for your marriage, it can be really helpful, because the ways that we fall when you have a family are oftentimes in your relationships.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to just really quickly, by the end of the day or maybe the next morning, to recognize, like, how did I fail in the relationship with my spouse or with my children, and kind of redirect our behavior into more positive patterns.
I think it just sets such a great humble foundation. So it can I feel like it helps you let your guard down when like, and I'll just share my experience from last night, because my husband and I did the first module together last night. Like, you're not coming in with like, okay, tell me all the things that you think I'm doing wrong, which feel like we want to hear feedback about where the other person is feeling like unloved or unseen or whatever. But there's this first step of like, where do you see yourself needing to grow in the marriage? And each person is agreeing to do a self-examination and admit like that this is an area I take responsibility for. And there's just something about coming into it knowing, okay, I'm gonna admit something. We're both gonna humbly say, okay, this is where I know I need to work, and I'm going to listen, and I'm not going to be like, yeah, that's right. I'm just going to listen. And we're both coming in like, okay, humbly, like bearing our hearts. That really is, I think, and asking the Holy Spirit to help us see that. It just lays a good foundation, I think, for creating an atmosphere of trust moving forward. And then continuing that is really, I think, what the examine prayer can do, is that it gets like a habit of self-examination. Asking the Holy Spirit to help you see what you're not seeing, being open to your spouse's help in that, but it's not so. I think it goes better when we're doing self-examination, asking the Holy Spirit, admitting what we see, and then the spouse doesn't feel such a need to beat you up more.
And the Holy Spirit's going to be more gentle probably than your spouse on you. So better to hear it from him first.
I mean, just last night, it was just so nice just to say some of these things intentionally. I think I just want to speak to my husband and I, we're not in a crisis mode, thanks be to God, in our marriage, but we always talk about how communication is an area where we need to grow. We're both super non-confrontational. So we don't fight a lot, which is a gift, but like, we don't talk about hard stuff either, because we just don't want to fight. But then there's not as much growth. Like you need a little bit of, we're not perfect. We're not fighting because everything's perfect. So, even just the first night, being able to say a few things that I've been wanting to say, but and again, my family of origin comes into this. I just get so nervous to speak anything. And I think he does too, that to be able just to share, okay, this is the time and we're going to do this right now. And it's not that big of a deal to just do it, but for whatever reason, it's just easier to watch. We watch hockey together pretty regularly. It's easier to just watch the hockey game and go to bed.
Much easier.
It's fine. I don't need to start anything, it's not that big of a deal. Brush it under the rug. And that's kind of our default mode, which it's, again, in long term, it's not going to serve us. You know, it's the path of least resistance. And so have set aside just a little bit of time last night to have this conversation and just to go through this first little exercise was really fruitful right off the bat. And so yeah, I just feel like it's stuff that you might on some level know intuitively, like this would be a good conversation to have. But even the first module I was telling them, I love how Sarah and Patrick give us real life examples. Like they sit there and they do it, and you can tell it's real. Like you guys are kind of sharing.
Yeah, we use real examples.
I think they actually thought about it. It's real. It's my favorite is seeing you guys just be so vulnerable. It makes it that much better. But it's awkward. Like, and Sarah says it. She's like doing these exercises. It's gonna feel awkward. It feels awkward for the therapist. Like it's okay, just do it because you've just gotta talk about this stuff. And it's very fruitful. So yeah, I really
I'm
love
so
it.
glad to hear that, Karen.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean that's just I say module. I don't know what you guys call it. Part like section 1 in it.
Part 1, yeah.
Part 1. Yeah.
And that's, part of my goal with this is to really kind of try to, and I think we've done this and just culturally is kind of break down the stigma of like getting help or like seeking help for your marriage or yourself personally. I think we've done a good job over that the last 30, 20 years or whatever. But I think, whatever, I mean, it's probably our own pride or just fear, but like you said, just jumping in there, being intentional about it, but also having that avenue to do it, right? Because we can access a lot of information, right? We have everything we could need at our fingertips. But the process is the really important part, right? Is plugging ourselves into a process and moving through that process is essential, right?
And that's what you talk about from the get-go. What's your commitment level? Like so much of it is committing to showing up, whether you feel like it or not. Like,
exactly.
Record the hockey game, just take 15 minutes, watch the video. Because I mean, we know that's how growth happens. Like we know that's how growth happens when we want to get fit, we want to change our health. The same thing is with our marriage. But when you have like what you guys provide, and I'm going to show, here's the workbook for those who are watching a video. It's very lovely. You can download the PDF for the workbook, or I just chose to order it on Amazon. Very affordable. But like it's just so easy to just sit there and be like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna fill this out. I'm gonna set the time. I say easy. It's simple. It's not overwhelming. It just takes a little bit of commitment, and that's the idea. Is you lay out a week, like 6 weeks, essentially, is sort of the time frame. And you commit. We're going to show up once a week for 6 weeks for this conversation. You can do that. And imagine the transformation that can happen in committing to this together. It's beautiful. So anyway, that's part 1. So that's the commitment level. You start looking at where you agree that you want to grow, where you take some advice or get some input from your spouse in a very gentle way. Do some role playing of basic active listening skills is one of the big things you start with at the beginning, which is helping each other feel heard, which is a big thing in marriage. Like, do you feel understood and heard by your spouse? Like there's a way to help that happen that you probably doesn't sound like maybe normal conversation, but it's important to sometimes practice that, because again, back to being intentional.
Yeah,
and
not
then
only
from there into like communication and pitfalls. So I don't know, if you want to, Patrick, I want to give you guys a chance to maybe give a little bit of an overview of how you move people through the course in general with any of the kind of highlights.
Yeah. So, like you said, we start off with laying that foundation and building simple skills. Not only being heard and allowing yourself to be heard, but also to be tuning into what your spouse is saying and what they're feeling emotionally is important, and to get out of my own head about what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling in the moment, but really tuning into your spouse. So often when we go into conversation or conflict, we're thinking about myself and what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I need to justify or rationalize or argue about, versus what is my spouse trying to communicate to me right now about what he or she is really thinking or feeling. So that kind of sets the foundation with some simple skills, and then we go into more communication. Talk a lot about further communication skills, but also communication pitfalls and things to avoid, and problems and habits that we can easily get sucked into, whether it's through our family of origin or just the way we were raised, or bad habits we picked up along the way. So really being mindful of those things, and then really working to avoid those things, of course. So communication is part two. And then, you know, and then that moves into also thinking about what are those areas in my life that I need to heal. Maybe things that I'm inordinately attached to, you know, things of excess in my life that are damaging or destructive to myself or to my marriage, my relationship. Just really making that strong self-assessment of what are those things that have creeped into my life that are breaking down and damaging myself, and maybe the intimacy in my relationship. And then once we've kind of, that section is called clean house, right? And once we've kind of cleaned house, we want to also be thinking about what am I going to fill with, right? What am I going to replace that with? So we talk a lot about establishing right priorities, and having the proper mindset for our relationship and our marriage going forward, because we talk so much about our marriages being vocations, right? Those vocations that help strengthen us, purify us, and bring us to heaven ultimately. So, you know, it's kind of the process, simply put. And then just wrapping things up, and like we've talked about, this is part one of a part two series, and so the part two would of course build on and go further in depth in these areas and help bring couples, you know, further in the process. So
yeah, it's so good. I feel like you use this word, like self-assessment, looking at evaluating areas of attachment. I know part of it is looking at how you're spending your time, different things like this. I mean, it's just this decision to, you know, look at, I guess, what we want, you know, the kind of marriage we want, and versus where we are, and taking that honest inventory of our lives. And what I love about doing this in like a course format is, you know, and I'm sure this happens in marriage counseling as well, but there's just something about this agreement. I'm gonna do some self evaluation, you know, because I think so many people come into marriage counseling being afraid, and I think they can have this experience sometimes, unfortunately, that they're just going to be beat up, like, and told all the things they're doing wrong. And I hear this from, you know, husbands pretty regularly. Like, I go to marriage counseling, and the whole time I'm just being picked on and told all the things that I'm messing up on, and that's like traumatic, and you don't feel safe there. That's never the intention, of course, of anyone, but it can happen. When you're both coming in together with a plan where you're both owning that we both have areas that we need to grow. And there's just this, I keep coming back to this deep call to humility in marriage, where if I'm not going to get anywhere trying to point the finger, being like focusing on what I want to say more than what I need to hear. It creates this environment where that, I think it just allows for a lot of growth and as people, again, the biggest thing is showing up every week. But as you do that together and say, okay, I'm going to do the self-assessment. I'm going to really look at what I'm attached to, where I'm spending my time. I mean, I may even just talking about from my last example of my husband and I, you know, we spend time. There's nothing wrong with watching hockey games or sports. My husband absolutely loves sports, and I've kind of jumped into like bond with him in that, like in a way that, and we've enjoyed it.
That's great.
Which is great. It's not a bad thing, but if that's happening and we're really not spending time praying together because, it's 11 o'clock, better go to bed, you know, like there's just this, okay, we need to intentionally set aside time before we watch the game. Hey, we have this ability to record it now, you know, like there's really it's just the little intentional things we can do to say, I want to have an awesome marriage. I want to have a great marriage. Or, you know, I want to, if you're in crisis mode, I just need to do something to get out of this. And you take that first step. And know that, like, telling your spouse if they're hesitant, this isn't going to be me telling you all the things you're doing wrong. Maybe there needs to be an apology for the times if that has been the process so far, is because you're feeling unsafe and so frustrated that your way of dealing with it is shooting them with all of these accusations that you probably feel are true and warranted, but clearly not bearing fruit. So Let's just
Yeah.
rein those in.
Yeah, definitely.
But this gives you a place to say, okay, we're going to come together and both own that we both have areas to work on. And this
Yeah.
foundational course focuses on those key core skills of communication, removing the pitfalls, the obstacles, the becoming aware of the attachments, or just the little tweaks that you can make to lay a foundation where you can feel safe and begin to identify, like we've talked about here and there, is some of those probably wounded areas in our own stories. Like if you've been a child of divorce and you've never managed the pain from that, or just never had a place to process that, which so many kids didn't, it affects you, even if they tell you it didn't, and at least gives you a there's areas that you need to, let's say, gaps in your development as far as the model of what a healthy marriage looks like that need to be filled. And this can really serve that goal in a really powerful way. So I just love that. I love the depth, but the simplicity of what you guys have created here in this part one. And I'm excited to see part two, because I feel like I'm the tendency in it's like to go probably a little too soon into the deep end of the pool when it comes to healing. I mean, I love to just help people see, like, connect the dots of their stories, but the area of just
which is so important too.
Important, but I think the important piece too, and I'm not trying to beat myself up, but the skills that we kind of don't want to assume. We just make sure, okay, I need to have these basic skills of communication and like habits within my life to create an environment that's conducive to change and to growth. And I can't go to that deep place of healing until I've laid that foundation. So again, that's what this is about, and I love it.
And I think speaking about that a little bit is and when we do have that openness and that willingness to change, that receptivity to the Holy Spirit, I mean, we're going to go there eventually. Like God's going to lead us in there because God wants to heal that in us, right? So and I think that's definitely coming. We're going to work that in, going deeper, of course, but like you said, those skills are important, laying that foundation, and then that openness and receptivity. And like you've been saying, the humility is such a big part of it. So
because if you go into the deep end before you have this, you feel like you're drowning, and then you give up.
Yeah,
You're just like,
true.
all right, I can't do this. So if you don't have these skills, it's not gonna serve you in the long run. So this is such an important first step. There's so much I could say. I know there's so much you guys are working on that will keep people aware of as it comes forward, but I just can't say enough that anyone listening who's felt like the Holy Spirit is been putting on their heart that, like, their marriage could use some attention. And again, you don't have to be in crisis mode. And I actually encourage you not to wait until you're in crisis mode to begin investing intentional time into your marriage. This is a super affordable way to begin in the new year, when we're all like I'm going to begin tackling this goal. I'm going to set aside the next 6 weeks with my spouse. We're going to really commit to our marriage in a new way. I think this would be a great investment for anyone, a super affordable, great investment for anyone looking for that resource. So where could they find more information on this, guys?
Yeah, so the website where everything is hosted is called restorcatholicmarriage.com. So they just visit the website there and they'll see the first initial program is Restore Part 1. There's multiple different options or offerings on the website. So Restore is the basic program for couples who want to improve and strengthen and grow, heal their relationship. Like you said, it's certainly not, it can be, of course, but it's not only for couples in crisis. It's for really all couples who want to grow, There is other parts, which there is the H.E.R recovery program that I've also built. And so obviously that's very, very much a niche program for those couples who have infidelity in their relationship. And the first part is just the triage program, which really helps them after that initial discovery or confession of infidelity to really work through those initial weeks, because those are critical. Statistically, they show that couples who have that support there the rate of saving their marriage goes up significantly. It's when they don't have that support, those steps to take early on, that things can go south really quickly. So The affair recovery triage program is there as well. And then also a parish offering for the people who would be interested in using this in a parish setting.
Yeah.
Whether that be over like a 6-week process or a weekend retreat. So
yeah, that's great. I forgot about, I do want to say with maybe we'll do another episode specifically about the affair recovery, because I feel like that's a really huge whole topic in and of itself. But if somebody listening was interested in looking at the affair recovery piece, is that like a separate thing? Does it go with Restore, or would they look at
no, it's certainly
it's
a completely separate program.
Yeah.
So separate content, separate videos, separate workbook, all separate stuff.
Okay.
So
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
It's all there though.
Yeah.
So if you want to check it out.
It's all there. Just to say something about the affair recovery part, I think Patrick did a really good job, because it's obviously such a difficult time when someone's facing that situation in their relationship. And I think Patrick handled it really sensitively. There's no pressure for anyone to try to save the relationship. This is really just for either person in the relationship, how to proceed in a positive way.
Yeah.
And to use the resources that they have available to them to really make the best of obviously like a horrible situation.
Yeah.
So I think Patrick handled it in a really good way, even though it's really, really sensitive topic, really difficult topic to share about in a program like this.
And I think I remember, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's two separate tracks, the way it's built out in a very unique way. It's one track for the wayward spouse and one track for the betrayed spouse. So they would both have their separate videos that they would, and workbook questions that they'd be working through. There are a number of videos in the middle that they kind of join together and watch either together or concurrently at the same time, and then can have discussions about those. And then, series of videos to finish up. So
yeah, I really think that would be one quick question before. I would love to talk about that in a future episode, because I'm curious. I've heard different people because we know that there's also, obviously there's the infidelity, like having an affair, but does this include, or within this course, like infidelity that is experienced through like pornography addiction or anything like that? Or is that sort of seen as like a separate? I've heard sometimes it's sort of lumped together in some way.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a betrayal.
Betrayal.
It's a betrayal wound, right? And so it could be used in that way, but it's built specifically for like a physical infidelity, that type of thing.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure. Okay, great. Well, these are amazing resources. I'm really excited to share these with everyone, and I will put the links to this in the show notes for you guys to just click and check it out. But I'm just so grateful for you guys for what you've created, for your vulnerability in creating it. I keep saying that, but it's such a piece. Like I think it's so powerful when you have a therapist, a counselor who is sharing, like they've got this knowledge and stuff, but like we don't all have it all figured out. There's something that's just comforting to go in and say, we're all broken. Every marriage needs healing. No marriage is perfect. And the way that you guys model that, and just your examples and just showing us how to kind of do these exercises, was, for me, it was my favorite part. I mean, obviously the information's great. Maybe it's because I love you guys and I know you, and it makes me feel better about myself.
Karen. Thank you, Karen.
Well, it might make y'all feel better about yourself too.
Yeah.
We're happy to hear that. Great feedback. And definitely Patrick and I would have felt very uncomfortable and not genuine, coming into it, acting like we do have it all figured out, because that's definitely not the case. We struggle just like every couple does, trying to work together and grow in the relationship. So we definitely wanted to be honest and real about that in the program.
We did a great job. It's so well done, guys, too. Like there's a lot of courses out there, and this is super professionally done. You can see it on the video. We'll send a link to just the video to see the overview for those who are curious, but it's really, really well done. So compliments to you on just the quality of a program you've created. So I'm just
excited. Thank you, Karen, and thanks so much thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk with you about it. And it's always good to chat.
Always good.
We always enjoy our time with you.
Me too. Good to see you guys. Have a wonderful day, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. All right. God bless.
God bless.